New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced she will quit next month and is not seeking re-election. She says she no longer has enough in the tank to lead after nearly 6 years in the job. There will be a vote within her party in the coming days to determine her replacement. And for more, we're joined by Geoffrey Miller, political commentator and geopolitical analyst at the Democracy Project. So, Jeff, to a political watcher like yourself, has this really come as a surprise?
Well, yes and no. It is a shock, of course. We were all surprised here in New Zealand, but there was some chatter in New Zealand towards the end of last year, 2022, that this could be a possibility. Jacinda Ardern has seemed tired. It's been a pretty hard 5 years, but also her party is doing quite badly in the opinion polls at the moment. And Labour won 50%. They won an absolute majority at the elections back in 2020, and they're polling now in the low 30s. So her party has become unpopular. And Jacinda Ardern personally has become quite unpopular herself. So I think there are a lot of reasons for her to go, but I think we should take this perhaps at face value. She is tired, burned out, and she's come back after a summer holiday here in New Zealand and decided that she doesn't want to continue.
Jeff, a lot of things you mentioned there, but nearly 6 challenging years in the job. What will she most be remembered for, you think?
I think she'll be remembered mainly for crisis management. She dealt with the Christchurch mosque attack tragedy back in 2019, the volcanic eruption later that year, and then, of course, her response to COVID-19. And that was one long-running crisis. And, of course, that was the case all around the world. New Zealand was no different. New Zealand's strategy, though, was a bit different, and New Zealand introduced really tough border restrictions under Jacinda Ardern. And Jacinda Ardern herself didn't travel internationally for 2 whole years during that pandemic. She only made her first trip, actually, to Singapore in April 2022. So it was a long time between trips overseas for her. And, COVID-19 was both the making and the breaking of Jacinda Ardern. She became very popular internationally, but internally in New Zealand, she became quite a divisive figure in the end. And I think, COVID-19 was perhaps the start of that. And, in the end, with 2022, we saw a lot of divisive issues in New Zealand, mainly over domestic topics, but the cost of living and inflation, like everywhere in the world, has been a big topic. Cost of living, cost of housing in New Zealand, and local issues relating to the role for governance by New Zealand's Indigenous Maori population. There was a lot of debate and polarisation over these kinds of issues. And Jacinda Ardern was really the face of all of them. She was a very prominent figure in her government, far more prominent than any of her ministers. And, that was, I guess, her strong point, but also her Achilles heel in the end.
And who takes over is the next question, Jeff. Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson says he doesn't want the job. So what's your take on the likely candidates?
That was the second surprise this afternoon here in New Zealand, that Grant Robertson, who had always seemed the heir apparent, the finance minister, didn't want the job. That's what we were expecting. If Jacinda Ardern did stand down, then he would be almost certainly the new Prime Minister, the new Labour leader, but he doesn't want the job. So we're scratching around sort of thinking about who would take over now. And it seems likely that Chris Hipkins, who is the police minister, might be in the running. He's the police minister now, but he was the face of the COVID-19 response and developed a real reputation for competence. And he will be a bit of a contrast from Ardern, not as flashy, but he seems to be probably the front runner. But a wild card could be Kiri Allen, who is the Justice Minister. Now, look, she's a Maori and Indigenous Maori woman. She would be New Zealand's first Maori Prime Minister, and a woman as well. She's also lesbian, so there would be a lot of firsts there. She hasn't ruled herself out yet whether she wants the job. It will be really interesting to watch. We're not going to have to wait too long, though. I think in a matter of days, we'll probably know who the next Labour leader will be, and therefore the next New Zealand Prime Minister.
So what do you think? Do you think that the new Labour leader, whoever it is, could give the party a shot in the arm ahead of elections this October?
It's possible. As I said to you earlier, Jacinda Ardern personally had become quite unpopular over particularly the past year, as we came out of that COVID-19 period. So it's possible that a new leader gives the party effectively a fresh coat of paint and a fresh chance to prove itself with voters, and perhaps voters who had been turned off by Jacinda Ardern personally will now take a second look at Labour if it's led by the likes of Chris Hipkins, for example. That could be the case. Chris Hipkins, though, he's going to have a job of proving a point of difference really with Christopher Luxon, who is also a white male leader, middle-aged, for the National Party, the main Conservative party, who are in opposition and who are riding high really in the polls now. The National Party seem to be in the box seat when it comes to the election year this year, and they've certainly got an opportunity now that Jacinda Ardern has left the stage to make more of a profile for themselves. So it's certainly going to be an interesting year this year in election year 2023 here in New Zealand.
And Geoff, thank you very much. That's all the time we have. Pleasure speaking with you. Geoffrey Miller, political commentator and geopolitical analyst at the Democracy Project.